Okay, what we're about to unpack is a story that basically redefines what it means for a relationship to go wrong. We are heading to Bengaluru, where a so-called trust exercise turned into something absolutely fatal.
It seems the playbook for modern relationships just got a horrifying new chapter added to it. And believe me, it's a level of intensity that nobody should ever be aiming for. So our story unfolds in Bengaluru, India's big tech hub, a city known for innovation, for ambition. But in this case, it's also the backdrop for a trust exercise that was taken to a terrifying and ultimately fatal extreme. So let's break down the first part of the story. We're calling it Modern Love's New Level, because what started out as a promise of some romantic excitement, well, it spiraled into something much darker.
Okay, so what was the setup here? How did this whole situation even begin? It started, like a lot of things do, with a pretty simple invitation.
It began with the simple call from his girlfriend, and she's promising him a surprise. You can just imagine the anticipation, right? A little break from the routine, a hint of romance, maybe some excitement.
And you know what? He was right. There was excitement. But it wasn't the romantic, let's just watch Netflix kind of excitement. It was the chilling, you're about to become the main subject of a true crime documentary kind.
And that leads us straight to the deadly surprise. Because this wasn't just some spontaneous act. We're about to see how a so-called trust exercise was, in reality, a very carefully planned and horrifying final exit.
What is so deeply disturbing here is how methodically this was all carried out, as you can see from the steps. It was disguised as BDSM roleplay, a situation that, by its very nature, requires an immense amount of trust. So he was blindfolded, his hands and feet were tied, he was completely vulnerable, placing his absolute, total trust in her.
And this is the absolute core of the whole deception. The entire culture around these kinds of activities, as you see online, is built on the foundations of consent and safe words. But in this reality, those safeguards were just completely thrown out the window. This wasn't an experiment in trust, it was a premeditated murder.
It seems a very small but incredibly critical detail was missed here. It's not just about trusting someone. You also have to be absolutely sure of who it is you're placing that trust in. A really grim but necessary lesson.
All right, let's peel back another layer of this disturbing story. This section is a twisted plot twist, because if you think the how is shocking, the why is even more chilling and, frankly, senseless. So, what was the plot twist? What could possibly drive someone to do something like this? This timeline shows the truly staggering speed of the retaliation. On day 1, she's rejected after a marriage proposal. By the very next day, she's carrying out a fatal experiment. The escalation from rejection to murder in just 24 hours it's almost incomprehensible. So the takeaway from this twisted logic is just terrifying. You don't just break up with someone you disagree with, no, you find a permanent solution. The sheer coldness and finality of that mindset is what makes this so profoundly disturbing. And just when you think this story can't get any more disturbing, it does. His final moments were recorded, and the questions this raises are just chilling. Was this some kind of trophy? A piece of evidence to be savored later? The psychology behind that decision is just deeply unsettling. This brings us to our final section, the so-called lesson. And this is where we really need to move past the horrifying what and try to understand the broader why and what our online culture gets so dangerously wrong when it comes to relationships.
This case really highlights a dangerous cultural thing that's happening. We have all these self-proclaimed real experts giving out relationship advice, creating this false sense of expertise. Yet, at the very same time, we're becoming collectively worse at spotting fundamental red flags, like someone's inability to handle rejection. This story is a brutal reminder that a surprise can be way more than a gift. Sometimes it's a stark character reveal that we just can't afford to ignore. And maybe most importantly, not every edgy trend we see online is meant for the real world, especially when it involves putting your life in someone else's hands.
So let's be absolutely clear. At the end of the day, this isn't some dark love story. This is a toxic combination of straight-up planning, dangerous obsession, and profound stupidity. Nothing more, nothing less.
And here is the most dangerous part of this whole thing. There's a real risk that people out there will see this story and they'll start to romanticize it, calling it toxic love. But it's not. No, my friend, this is not love. This is a case file.
a criminal record. And that is the only way it should ever be seen.
Which leaves us all with one final crucial question to think about. In a world that is just saturated with advice and trends about relationships, how do we get better at telling the difference between real love and a case file that's just waiting to be opened?